Good morning, everybody. It is September the 18th. Welcome to NTWC Plus for today. Now that we're past the peak of the hurricane season, things are not going to quiet down, though. They never do this soon on, but got a great program for you today. Mark Sudduth is going to be with us, going to talk about Francine and things that happened in, around, and during Francine. Some good, some bad, but we're going to get a fascinating conversation, I'm sure. Bill Reed's with us. We'll get to Bill in just a second. Dr. Hal Needham, Hurricane Hal is here as well. Hurricane Hal has a different background today. Good morning. Where are you?
Hey everyone, I'm still in Galveston, but I'm going to be hitting the road for New Orleans momentarily. So it'll be a fun little, but I'll be able to track along, and I think we're going to have a great discussion this morning.
Terrific. Good to have you with us this morning. Bill Reed, good morning to you as well.
Yeah, Tim, back at you the same way. Summer exists in all its full glory here in Texas.
Doesn't it though? Before we get to the program, let's thank our sponsors who make the program a reality week in and week out. USAA, thanks USAA. South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau. We'll be back on South Padre Island the first week of April. We hope you'll join us there in person, and we'll all be there having a good time. The Weather Company, Weather Boy, Weather Call, all folks that make these programs a reality here on NTWC Plus, many supporting the Storm Science Network as well. We appreciate all that. Thank you so much for all you do. So let's see, Bill, we were talking about, I got the rain this week. I had about 6 inches of rain in my house over the weekend. Usually it's you guys in Galveston or something seeing the big rain. And as far as Texas goes, it was our turn for a change.
Yeah, we've gone about 10 days, I guess, now without any rain. I actually washed the cars for the first time since June. But the big ridge is built back, and it's hot. It's stagnant like air, not much wind. But whenever we got the big high pressure, we don't get the fast little spinners coming out of the Gulf.
There you go. There you go. I think you've got intro duties this morning, so why don't you take it away and introduce our guest today, who's somewhat of a regular on our show.
My pleasure. Yeah, we got Mark Sudduth back with us today. We've had him on, I think, just about every year that we've been doing the online shows, and he's come to our conference a number of times and presented his work. For those that don't know him, he's worked as an entrepreneur in the hurricane business since 1995, almost 30 years into the game. He started a hurricane intercept research team in 1998 and hurricanetrack.com in 1999. And the hallmark of his work is he's developed this remote video system, which keeps evolving, by which his team placed video cameras out to record what's happening in real time without the people having to be in harm's way while he does it. In 2008, he started providing his on-site information to CNN, and of course, it was a very big year. We had Hurricane Ike over here. I'll never forget that because I was in Miami. And Mark continues his work today, and now he feeds information to the folks at Fox Weather. Welcome, Mark.
Good to be here. Wow, what an interesting season it's been, with the thought of many, many, many hurricanes and named storms and whatnot that hasn't happened as we thought it would, but we've had a lot of impacts, haven't we? We've had Beryl all the way through the Caribbean and then into Texas. I was there for that. We had Debbie. My equipment was there thanks to our friend Marcel. You guys know Marcel, our Brazilian friend from, he's in North Carolina now, but he set equipment up for me for Debbie. I was on a cruise ship coming back from Alaska. Wow. And then I went over to Bermuda for Ernesto and was in the eye of Ernesto over there. Josh Morganman was there too. And then, of course, Francine down in Louisiana, old Cajun territory. And Francine was very challenging. Hurricane Hal, let's get you to pop back up. Talk a little bit about, because Hal knows that area pretty well. He's headed over to New Orleans today, as he mentioned. Louisiana is tough, isn't it? Geographically.
It is tough.
The people are great, but geographically, that's a tough nut.
It's so complex. You know, you have all this coastal marsh when you get in those coastal parishes, right? And then you have Highway 90 coming through Morgan City up through New Iberia. But the real population corridor getting through Lake Charles, Lafayette, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, it's really, 60, 70 miles inland along I-10. So it's a hard place to film surge. And then I remember when I was a grad student at LSU, there was an effort to map the levees, which at first doesn't sound that bad. We think about the big federal levees around New Orleans, but there are hundreds of little local levees. Some of them are 150, 200 years old that had not previously been mapped, and that redirects the water flow. So it's a complicated area. I guess I could summarize it by, we have little highways going down to these tiny little towns that you go southeast or west, it's just surrounded by marsh. So it's not one of these areas where you can really make a lot of movement in a lot of different directions. Usually there's one road in and one road out. And again, there's a lot of marsh in there. It's a tough place to chase and travel and document storms.
Yeah. Plus,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Bill, you gonna add something?
Yeah, and then for those that are in the chasing world, these storms produce a run-up tide as they come in there. And some of those roads are so close to sea level that in blue skies, what seems like way in advance of the storm, the roads get cut off by overflow from the run-up tide that goes in there. And you ever been caught in one of those?
So far, so good. No.
Guys, I remember back in Hurricane Delta, I think it was in 2020, I was in Delcom and we were expecting a decent surge, and I still remember I was filming the surge and Lou Fincher reached out. He said, "Are you in a boat?" Because there are all these whitecaps. But what I drove that road segment I was on. I probably drove it 10 times in the daylight because I was just worried about any little dips there that I could hit. And I think, Mark, you cover so much ground. You know how dangerous it is to be on unfamiliar roads at night. You really want to know the lay of the land. And Bill, it's exactly what you're saying too. With it so low lying, you just need one little dip and all of a sudden you're in deep water, and it's really can be potentially dangerous chasing territory as well.
Well, our game plan was to set some stuff up in Mississippi because Mississippi Sound is always going to surge, it seems, when you get anything coming into that direction, especially Hancock County. But we put a camera up in Gulfport at our usual spot at the Small Craft Harbor, which is always an irony to me because that's where we literally started this 19 years ago for Katrina. We had a camera system there back in the very early days, literally the first days of it. Right in front of the White Cap restaurant that used to be out there on the Erie Pier. And all of that got washed away, including our equipment, somewhere in a landfill or at the bottom of the harbor. Who knows? Maybe the Indiana Jones of the future will find it, and we'll know exactly what it caught someday far from now. But yeah, we did Gulfport and then Waveland, just a little bit to the east of the Silver Slipper. And then we made our way over into Louisiana, my partner Matt Clemens and myself, stationing in Morgan City. And we went down to Sippermore Point, and I know Hal knows Sippermore Point quite well. Remember Don Moe that used to live down there? And we got down there the morning of the landfall day. And it's weird because we didn't have a real good signal down there for our LTE network. We were running on Starlink for our vehicle cam. We have the Starlink Mini. So we had excellent broadband from the vehicle. But in 2020, when we put cameras down there I know we did for Delta. We might have done it for a couple of others, but I know we did for Delta. We had a good signal. Actually, it was on Don's house. But this time we didn't. And so we were like, well, don't have a signal. Stuff can change in 4 years, infrastructure, I don't know. And we decided not to put a camera there. Plus how we were not sure about how Vermilion Bay was going to react to a storm coming in at that weird angle. And was on the phone with the weather service over in Lake Charles, my friend Lance over there, trying to figure it out. And it's what I'm saying. It's hard to know. This is a very unique track that this was taking. And then I looked at places like Cocodrie and Dulac, however you say it. Then we just decided, well, let's focus on Morgan City. And we'll put a camera there for sure, right on the Atchafalaya River, just in case it happens to come up and over. And let's put a weather station, and this is important, big part of the story, and a camera system on that weather station where it's watching it on the bridge that goes over Amelia. I don't know the body of water that's through there. I should, I'm a geographer, but great spot. It was elevated and it looked like it was going to be in the right front quadrant, and that was running. And we just kind of monitor things, category 1, category 2, weren't real sure what the surge was going to be like, just kind of playing it cautious. So we got all that set up about early morning time. on the day of landfall there. I don't even remember what day it was now. It's crazy, isn't it? What day was landfall, Hal? When the heck was that last week?
Yeah,
Monday,
that was
Tuesday,
was
Wednesday.
it Tuesday, Wednesday?
It's like a week ago. Yeah. Yes, it was Wednesday. So see, it ages you in here. Trust me. And we got the camera system set up and the weather station set up. And look, I know that Bill introduced me talking about these camera systems, and that sure is a big hallmark. I mean, there's one right there. But the weather data is extremely important to me, and that is much harder to collect. Good wind data. Bill, you remember as being director of the NHC, good wind data, solid, reliable wind data is extremely difficult to capture. There's Texas Tech, University of Florida, a lot of people putting effort into it. It's hard.
Yeah, and to harden an instrument to survive the elements,
Right.
detracts from the sensitivity it needs to measure what you're trying to get. So it's a tough nut to crack.
So what we had done is developed a system where you can clamp it down to a bridge on the Jersey wall, an Arm Young anemometer, a little data logger in there on a Raspberry Pi. And then we set the camera system up about 20 feet away to look back at it. It's neat to see. It also, we thought, would help to mitigate people messing with it. But about a half hour after we set it up, somebody, in fact, came along, knew exactly what they were doing, knew how to disable everything, and stole both pieces of equipment. They, weirdly enough, took the camera about 30 miles, 40 miles to the west over to Franklin and set it back up, turned it back on, aimed it at some houses, whatever. We figured it out pretty quickly, our back-end team on Google Maps. Oh, that's wherever. And we drove over there and got it, but the weather station was gone. And it really just put a huge damper on everything because we only brought one weather station with us for this one. And that data is just so important. The cameras are going to see what they're going to see. A lot of people out there, a lot of chasers, but that wind data is so important to me to try to capture that. The pressure data too. And we know what a good job Josh Morgerman does at getting that pressure data, but the wind stuff, the wind is so complex. And I felt like we got robbed of more than just the equipment. It's that opportunity to know through a time history what that wind trace was. And then weirdly enough, before the eyewall got there, we went over to Gray, Louisiana, just south of 90, like literally right there, northwest of Houma, in a big open area to just kind of sit there and be angry about everything and have that eyewall come over us. Somebody, whoever took it, paired the Raspberry Pi to an AT&T device, probably a mobile hotspot, and it was running again, and it was sending data. And we couldn't figure out where, obviously, and our back-end team was able to get into the Raspberry Pi and get information on what device is connected to it, and it told us the IP address and that it was, in fact, an AT&T device. We think the person was watching our live vehicle cam, and they knew that we were on to them, and they shut it off, and it hasn't been on since. I did a YouTube video about it the other day, a nice, post-mortem on everything, describing the theft and all of that. And I was thinking, it just dawned on me before we started talking, I'll make it official right here. I will offer $1,000 cash if somebody can find that weather station and return it perfectly and not, oh, here it is, but it's been run over by a truck. No, it doesn't count. If I can get that thing back in operating condition, just like we left it, maybe that'll motivate somebody. $1,000 in cash, because you think about it, that thing cost almost $3,000 to put together. So instead of having to buy a new one, maybe somebody, oh, I know old Joe's got it or whatever, and I'll take $1,000 to rat him out. Sure. I mean, you can find me on the internet, Twitter, whatever. And seriously, I'll put it right here, right now, $1,000 cold hard cash. It'd go a long way if somebody would tell me where that thing is, but it has to be in working condition. I can't have it all beat to heck from a sledgehammer. But we lost it. Everything else worked really great, though.
There's your side gig for this trip, Hal, is find the weather station.
Yeah, Hal, when you're over in Louisiana, see if,
Mark, I was going to say I want to vouch for Bill Reed's character. When he shows up with the weather station, I can vouch that he was in his office last Wednesday. He's not the one that stole it. He has connections. So gotcha. When he shows up first week of April in South Padre with your weather station,
right? It'll be. He
has a good alibi. He had either that or he took his background with him on the road last week. That would be a lot of premeditated stuff, though.
Yeah, that would have been shortly followed by divorce papers from Donna, I'm sure. I don't chase hurricanes. I let them chase me.
Right. Well, it was a real bummer. Somebody knew exactly what they were doing, but I'm serious. If somebody knows something, and there were a lot of people out there, a lot of chasers, and as they say on this really popular show, it's a podcast called Crime Junkie. Somebody knows something. We're not dealing with a missing person. It's not a murder. It's not that big of a deal in the big scheme of the world. I get it. But to us, it's a big deal. You don't mess with somebody's project, and it was important to the people of Louisiana to have had that data. It's something, and we all got robbed of that. So I'm serious. $1,000 cash, real cash. What is that? Benjamin Franklin's, right? 10 of them. If somebody will cough up where that thing is, and we can leave it anonymous too. All I have to do is say, we gave the $1,000 to somebody who got our station back, and we can leave it quiet. I even said in my YouTube video, if the person that did it grew a conscience and will just email me and say, look, I'll go put it back on X bridge. We got plenty of people down there that would go get it. I'll never speak a word of it. And you have my word. Like, there's no reason to, maybe somebody made a bad decision that day. Seriously. But anyway, let's move on. We did have some great success. Before we get into that, do we need to do a break or anything? Because you know me, I can just talk and talk.
Now we're good for another 10 minutes or so. So talk away. Have a good time. Do you have any pictures of that weather station so we know what we're looking for? When I go to Louisiana, I'll go look for it.
Yeah, let's do the so let's see, I can share my screen. Share the whole. Oh, I guess you have to allow me, maybe. Oh, there it is. You see my screen?
It's coming. There it is. Yep.
All right, so let's go back to my posts and so that's what the weather station looks like. These are different vehicles that went by the last few minutes before the station was taken, but that is the weather station there on the right. And these are just different vehicles. Some of these vehicles are from chasers. We've already talked to them, looked at their live feeds from when it happened, and they had nothing to do with it. There's a good one. That's what it looks like. And, if anybody knows where that is, let me know. It's important. We'd love to get it back and put it into operation. But the one thing that we did that was really, really cool is we set up a new camera system. And this is a really neat example of it. This is right at point blank range on this new Ladner Pier, the memorial pier down there in Waveland, dedicated just last year. And this is the progression of the storm surge, a few feet from point blank. And this is not a GoPro. I'm not going to tell you exactly what camera it is because that's foolish. But it is a new camera that will record and stream at the same time. So if we lose the connection, say in a really powerful hurricane, it'll still record onto the chip. And it did a great job. It's similar to a GoPro. It's in a housing, so it's nice and protected. And it ran and ran and ran and went through wave after wave after wave in, appropriately enough, Waveland, Mississippi. So that was one positive that we got out of this from the the negatives there of the equipment being stolen. Let me turn that off so we don't keep hearing waves. There we are. Francine was not our best work. It was the challenging. We weren't even sure it was going to do much. And then the theft there just threw a big monkey wrench. But in the words of this guy right here, Duke University's famous Coach K, next play. You make a mistake, and some of it is on me. We didn't lock stuff down, didn't face the camera into the traffic. Some of that's my fault, but you know what? You move on, and we're going to be ready for the next one, which, according to some of the models, might be within the next 10 to 12 days. We'll have to see.
Yeah. Did you say you managed to come over for Barrel? Where did you set up your gear there?
So for Barrel, not going to make me think. Barrel, we actually stayed in Bay City, and the eye went right over us. And we had, I flew out for that one because you remember Barrel was like, is it not, whatever. So I flew out, can only bring limited equipment when we fly. And I had a camera system in Treasure Island, and we caught the surge coming in several feet. Really neat time lapse from all of that. Several rows back on a lady's house. Working with the public is so important. People will reach out to us and, hey, you can use our house if you want to and whatnot. And then we had one, and I knew this from many years of working up in the Houston area, And Bill, you'll know this area. It is South Maid Creek at Greenhouse. Low hanging fruit. If you get a few inches of rain in a short amount of time, South Maid Creek floods. It drains into Addicks Reservoir. And we put one there and got that whole event happening. All the cars that went across Greenhouse. I'm like, the turnaround, don't drown still doesn't work for people. We saw it and nobody got stuck, but we had 2 camera systems and then we reported live and whatnot from Bay City and got the eye.
Yeah, that was pretty good placement. That was pretty close to where the heaviest rain was from
Right.
Beryl.
Yeah, I got a little bit of a knack for these things and sometimes you get lucky. But yeah, for Beryl, the biggest thing was, of course, the power outages. And I remember remarking the day after on Twitter when I was going around, I know it's called X, no offense, but I call it Twitter, that there was just no crews. And we all know now, we're not going to go pointing fingers, but we know now how everything unfolded. But it was really, really strange to drive around the greater Houston area. And A, we could do so with ease because there was just very little traffic. And then B, just the lack of power crews that were out there. And different sections of Houston did have power. Others did not. Out near Bush Airport, where we were supposed to fly out, didn't have power. Both of our hotels were dark. But down in the Webster area, parts of that area did have power. It was really hit and miss. But I remember people, arguing back and forth on social about, I've got power, so everybody else must also as well, so you guys must be lying. It was really weird, like social media, and I keep telling Alex, we got to have somebody come on that can talk about at the conference this dark side of social media and the psyche of why people argue against evidence and whatever. Like, I'm not a social scientist technically, but I see it. How you see the same thing. We run into people that they think they know more than us. And it's like, we don't know everything, but a lot of times we know more than them. And that really manifested itself, I think, after Beryl.
Maybe it's there's kind of an undercurrent beneath that there's this growing mistrust of science, partly due to all the BS that's being put out by people, chastising scientists, not understanding their work, and then the mistrust of government. So they may think you're part of the government when we're doing those. But it's kind of
it's weird. What a weird era to live in.
I got a preparedness slide I used that was made by Centerpoint, the main provider there. And I forgot when, I think it was after Ike, but I'm not sure. But they have a table there with each category of storm and how much time it would take to rebuild the grid. And a Cat 1 is 7 to 10 days. And that was, I bet 95% were back up in 7 to 10 days. Yeah, they're getting crucified. I don't know. I don't keep up with that anymore, but I know one of the problems with the big metro areas is, you bring in crews from outside, but it's huge.
Yeah,
it's immense. The problem there was more outages from Beryl than there was from Ike.
That's crazy.
Not really, because we were on the right front quadrant of intensifying Beryl. We were on the west side of a steady to weakening Ike as it came in. So,
and see, this is where, and at the risk of sounding arrogant, like, I basically knew that was going to happen. I talked about it in my videos in the days before, that this right side of an intensifying storm to hurricane will be much more impactful than you guys can even fathom if you haven't been through it. Because how did I know that? Because, and Hal can attest to this, we've been through it. We've seen it. We know. And that is exactly what happened. I talked about it on Fox Weather. I'm like, this is going to be a big problem for the greater Houston area because it's going to be ramping up. You get those downdrafts that are much more efficient. There's just the mechanics of it. And look, we can't expect everybody to fully understand. I say fully, we still don't, obviously, but you know what I mean? Like, I get it. Most people just want to look at their phone. What's the percentage of, what's the probability I'm even going to have rain or wind? And that's the end of it.
Yeah. Well,
the level of education that we have, that's hard to expect everybody to have that. I understand.
And then on top of that, the whole lead up was the forecast was based on what was starting out as a tropical storm.
Right.
People have said and heard this too often that it's just a tropical storm or only a Cat 1. And hopefully there's a whole generation here that is no longer in that mode of thought on there. One of the interesting things that you've probably seen that I had not realized how bad it would be was the complete collapse of our modern technology. All the cell towers have backup battery systems or generators. They can't provide anywhere near the bandwidth
Right.
in normal times. Well, it ain't normal times. Everybody's trying to find out something, and it just collapsed. I couldn't even make a text over to my son.
Yeah, and Mark and Bill too, I thought with Beryl, what was interesting, we were seeing all these different points we talk about at NTWC. We talk about in South Padre in April, things like anchoring. Some of the early forecasts had it down by Mexico, and people checked out even as the forecast was moving farther north. And again, so much focus. I love when Alex and Tim put on that little game show of the biggest misunderstandings about hurricanes and tropical storms. I think one of the top ones was people thinking the worst impacts are right in the eye. I mean, this is something we educate on all the time, but so many people were just focusing, oh, it's going to miss Houston, it's going to miss Galveston, it's going down to Matagorda Bay. And we talk day and night about really near and to the right of the center where those big impacts are, but it's still just blindsided so many people.
Yeah. And that word it. Yes, absolutely. What is it? I mean, wow. And I mean, think about it. These were all Category 1, Francine 1-2 at landfall. Not the season that we anticipated yet. Still plenty of time on the clock, so we don't want to dismiss that. But pretty big impacts from 3 landfalling systems that were only low-end hurricanes. And then the potential tropical cyclone the other day for southeast North Carolina, that will be remembered for a long time. So, even a big season that doesn't produce, still has these low-end categories that produce high-end impacts. It's such a weird, the social scientists, I mean, I tell you what, like,
well, we
job security.
We build where we shouldn't build because
Right.
of the flood risk, and we build infrastructure that can't withstand even marginally strong winds.
Evidently, I think that's what was exposed this year. And look, back to Francine, I noticed in Morgan City, thank goodness we had Starlink because everything was out. T-Mobile, I had no throughput. Verizon, I had no throughput. But in 2020, 4 years ago, Delta and Laura and all that, we were fine. I mean, seriously, those were much stronger hurricanes. Weird. I don't know what happened. And again, not trying to besmirch these telecom companies, but it was really weird that night in Morgan City, and there was not a bunch of trees down, there was a lot of flooding. We just had no throughput. And if it wasn't for my Starlink Mini, which I was getting, 40, 50, 60 megabits down, 10 up, I was able to do my Fox hits, no problem, upload stuff. I mean, I had perfect, thanks to Mr. Musk there from SpaceX. Like, thank goodness, because the whole terrestrial network, went offline for whatever reason. I just can't figure it out. I figured it'd be much stronger after 2020.
Why don't we jump in and take our mid-break real quick, Bill? You can give us the it about what's out there right now, what it is out there now that we're talking about, and we'll move forward from there. And as you go to it, Mark, you mentioned the natural disasters, but these disasters aren't natural. They've been coming forever. We built in front of them. They're man-made disasters, Right. That's what we hear a lot. So, Bill, bring us up to date. What's going on out there today, and what do we expect?
Well, let's see what comes up here. Good. Everybody see it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
All right. This is the broad view of the tropical Atlantic. This is still all the moisture and boundaries and whatnot from potential tropical cyclone 8. I think we need to quickly run up a whole bunch of T-shirts saying "I survived potential tropical cyclone 8." That'd be an interesting sell on the East Coast, and it's going to continue to provide a rainy weekend, rainy end of the week through the weekend up in the Northeast. It's not moving away very fast. Caribbean looks quiet. Gulf looks quiet. First glance at this, you say this must be the remnant of Gordon, but no, Gordon's remnants is a handful of the convective spots down in here, which you can see why they ended its life as a tropical cyclone. It's an open disturbance now. This is the extratropical system that was north of it on an old front that's dissipating, and it's got a lot of wind shear. You can find the low-level center way out here to the west of the deep convection. And who knows, this may merge and become interesting, but not for long because it's heading out into eventually even stronger shear and cool water. Of interest back here close to home, go down on me. Anyway, looking at the Eastern Pacific, a lot of convection, but nothing that the Hurricane Center deems relevant for development in the next 7 days. But they are outlooking an area here in the Northwest Caribbean, and you normally you have some weather system to anchor it to what it has there, but it's actually based on a prediction, and we'll get into that in more detail. Why is this going so slow? My computer is tired. It's out hunting for Mark's weather station.
Yeah.
Anyway, here's the latest outlook overlaid on the sea surface temperatures. It's obvious this time of year it's warm enough just about everywhere in the tropical latitudes. 20% risk in this area here where we saw on the satellite, not much going on. Gordon down here, given a 60% chance of maybe reincarnating itself before heading off into the North Atlantic and sheer and cool water. What's going on in the Northwest Caribbean? Michael Lowry always has cool graphics, so I shamelessly stole one of his from his blog this morning to use in our discussion. The September, October is one of the prime times of the year that the Central American gyre, it got codified in some PhD work by one of the current hurricane specialists, so that terminology has come into play a lot. It's nothing new. It happens every year to some varying degrees of extent. And sometimes it spins off something that becomes a tropical cyclone. You might remember a storm named Michael from a few years ago. It originated from a disturbance spinning off of a Central American gyre. But anyway, it's a broad circulation that's roughly centered over the Central America. Sometimes it's a little further northwest over Mexico, but that's basically the how it works. Let's see what else I got here. Oops, I didn't need that. There we go. So the models, if this is starting out this morning, there's our system way out in the Atlantic that's not going to be a mess, but this is the 850 millibar fields. Easterly flow across the entire tropical Atlantic, turning around the subtropical high and feeding the 80-degree dew points into Hal and my house. The easterlies extend all the way out into the Eastern Pacific, so something will have to change to get us to the gyre. The wind shift along the tropical convergence zone is obvious here, and that may be part of what it happens, but time stepping the model through, the gyre may be showing signs of developing at about 72 to 78 hours from now over Central America, and then works its way up into the Northwest Caribbean. And this is one of those spin-ups along the gyre. The gyre itself is all the way, just like in Michael's diagram of it, it's about that same scale, but a smaller circulation gets going somewhere in the Northwest Caribbean. In this case, the GFS picks up on it and drives it in the Mexico Beach. I never heard of Mexico Beach before Michael, and now every now and then the models keep trying to hammer them again. There's a huge amount of variance in the models, and I guess I can do this to show the ensembles. The European forms it in the same place. The formation part for the models is fairly similar. And one slowly moving into Lixion Avila's rat hole, otherwise known as Bay of Campeche, and basically stuck there in that. And then there's another strong wave that may come into play for our interest come early October. It didn't come off. This just came off at the end of the model run. run there. And the GFS and guidance, it takes it anywhere from Veracruz to somewhere south of Newfoundland. Uh, until we get something more definitive already in place down there, I would basically just keep an eye on everything, because the where it's located. And other than that, we just keep playing with heat. The heat risks for the southern plains are pretty dramatic here for the end of the week before it starts abating some over the weekend.
I just noticed that none of those lines went to Galveston, Houston, that area. That was good. All those lines, none pointed to your house.
I erased them.
A little pin in there. Good work. Good work. Thank you all for that update. Next week at this time, we'll probably be talking about something very interesting once again. Let's take just a moment. I want to thank our sponsors, the folks who make it so we can do this each and every week. We're here every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Central Time, and we couldn't do it without folks like USAA, the South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Weather Company, Weather Boy, Weather Call, all a part of what we do here. And we appreciate you all being part of this. And of course, we'll be back live on South Padre Island, what happened, so we can get a lot of response from inside the storm. And we know that we're not quite done yet. So, we try to keep some openings for things. What do you got coming up on GeoTrek? What's the latest on GeoTrek?
Yeah, great question. Well, I'm heading over to New Orleans for the National Waterways Conference, and it just so happens I'm getting there about a week after Hurricane Francine. What's interesting, when we think about New Orleans, we think about storm surge risk, but also sometimes they have some issues with heavy rainfall, and that's what we saw during Francine. One of our long-term friends of NTWC, meteorologist Chris Franklin over there in New Orleans, he was posting a lot in Jefferson Parish, getting over towards Kenner and Metairie. They saw a tremendous amount of rainfall in a short amount of time. Some social media posts were showing some of the highest flood levels, at least as far as street flooding, since maybe the 1970s in some areas. So I'm taking my handheld recorder over there. I'm going to be part of this conference this week, but I'm also going to get on the ground and interview storm survivors that went through the heavy rainfall last week. Try to learn a little bit more about the perspective of heavy rainfall in New Orleans Metro, which obviously is complicated. A lot of that area is below sea level. They have to pump it out. I'm also going to meet up with Chris Franklin and do a brief interview with him and do a little episode there on rainfall risk in Metro New Orleans. That's kind of the latest thing going on right now with GeoTrek.
Can't wait to hear what you have. I've mentioned before, but I just love the interviews you do. Your questions are outstanding. The inquisitive nature just makes it a lot of fun to listen to. So I encourage people to check it out.
Thanks, Tim. Something I've been trying to do that's working well, we shortened the podcast to about 30 minutes. And what's been working really well is maybe a 10 to 15-minute interview with a scientist, and then get on the ground and talk to people that were impacted. We're finding that's a really neat little combo where you're getting some scientific input from an expert, but you're also talking to people that lived through this and that it impacted their home. So that's what we're going to be looking for on this episode. Stay tuned, and we'll keep you updated on what's going on with GeoTrek.
That's terrific. Can't wait to hear about it. Thanks, Al. We appreciate that. Mark, we talking about Francine. It was about 120 miles offshore from where we are here in deep South Texas. But yet the Highway 4 that goes to SpaceX, you've been out that highway that goes from Brownsville out to Boca Chica Beach, had about 1.5 feet, 2 feet of water on it. It was almost impassable from a storm that was 120 miles east. We're on the west side of it, but the tide really came up. I was on South Padre yesterday, and about 2 miles north of the hotel where we have the conference, you're up on just seashore. There's nothing up there, and there's still water over Highway 100. It's you can tell. I took some pictures. You can tell it had been maybe 1.5 feet higher. It's maybe a foot deep now, but still, it's a week after the storm passed by. 120 miles east of us. There was some rain to add to it a little bit, but just amazing the impact well outside, as you talked about, where you go to see the impacts.
Yeah, we saw that as we were making our way to Louisiana. We kept thinking about you guys down there. That west side had that curl and really looked like it was dumping a lot of heavy rain. And I mean, if it kept going in that direction, we kept thinking this thing's got to turn or it's going to make landfall right over our hotel there at South Padre. And it just, again, shows that I think the hardest thing for people to comprehend is the totality of the whole thing. Like we talked about it, that word, where's it going? People are thinking they don't understand it, but they're actually talking about the center. And then, we know that the effects extend so far beyond the center. And that's just a whole other challenge, just how to get that across to people. But I think more and more people are getting it, because we do have some really talented people out there that are doing informational videos, whether they are trained meteorologists or not. There's also the other side where it's just wrong information or not the right information is a good way to put it. But, I was thinking about some stuff that Hal was just talking about there about Jefferson Parish and just that whole southeast part of Louisiana. One thing we're going to do going forward before next hurricane season, I know Southwest Louisiana really well because of the 2020 season. And I know the area in and around Lake Pontchartrain because of 2021 with Ida, Laplace, Frenier especially, and up near Mandeville. I know New Orleans pretty well, but outside of that, south of Morgan City, Cocodrie, never been there. And how is it, Dulac or Dulake? How do you pronounce it?
Yeah, Dulac down there near Cocodrie as well.
Dulac. I think about Shrek. Remember, wasn't it Dulac that, anyway. I haven't been down there. I've been to Sycamore, but the point is, we're going to be going down to some of these places in the off season, probably next March, and meet with people and figure out where we could put stuff up in the future. We've got some ideas using Starlink going forward to where we can have access in a place like this, especially the new Starlink Mini, and develop these relationships ahead of time. Hal, as well as I do, a lot of those areas are just camps. We say just camps. Those camps are important to people in Louisiana. They're not big houses, they're camps, but those are the people that are working hard, putting the paycheck in the bank. They want to go to these camps, they want to go fishing, they want to enjoy the sportsman's paradise of Louisiana. So it is important to them. It doesn't matter that they're not $500,000 houses. It matters to these people. So I think it's important for me to get in there and meet people, know where we could set something up for the future. And then when they evacuate, we could have some things set up. Hopefully, like I said, using Starlink, we're working on this for next year, that the terrestrial network goes down. So what? We could have some cameras down there, and that could really help to inform people from the owners of those camps right on up to the National Hurricane Center Storm Surge Unit as to exactly what is going on. And that's one of the big lessons I learned from this. As much as I know, there's still plenty I don't know, especially about the geography. And then the most important part is the people, because at the end of the day, we are trying to help people with this information. Even if you know your house is destroyed, as bad as that sounds, people would rather know than be surprised later and not know. That being left in the dark and not having any idea is just terrible. And so even if they can know, oh man, it's really bad down there, they are ready to go. They have a little bit of an advantage rather than nobody has any information coming out. So I'm gonna make that a big mission of mine, to get to know the areas south of 90 towards Cocodrie and Dulac and elsewhere, because it matters. And we've met a lot of great people from Louisiana. We want to continue those relationships and build upon them.
The biggest piece of advice I can give you, if you show down there, if you're in your Duke Blue Devils, whatever, it's fine. Just don't wear Alabama Crimson Tide. That's the number one mistake you can make in South Louisiana. Besides that, maybe throw on a little purple and gold. You're going to do just great. The people are great, but I love what you're saying about getting out there in the off season. And like you said, these might be places that are mostly camps, but for people up in Baton Rouge, Lafayette, Lake Charles, that's where they've been going for generations, right? That camp might be, that might be in their family for 3 or 4 generations. So it's important to them. And also when we look nationally and internationally, there are a lot of grants. There's a lot of research focus on the coastal marsh of Louisiana, how quickly it's disappearing. So you get in there with some cams and you're documenting what's happening in a storm, whether it's a wave action, erosion rates, any of that can be extremely valuable to the scientific community.
Yeah, and Max Olson has put cameras down there. He did for Cocodrie, and he captured some great stuff coming out of there. And the fact that this has grown, I don't own the monopoly to this idea. Anybody can do it. It's just who's going to put in the effort. That's the end of the day. That's what it's all about. And to see it expanding, that other people are doing it, I don't look at it as competition at all. It's a huge coastline, and there's plenty of areas to put stuff. And so it's been nice to actually see. Okay, I didn't go to Cocodrie, but Max did, and he got some great stuff. That's on his Twitter. And it's important because, again, those people down there, hurricanes are a part of life. They're inconvenient. They can be devastating, certainly, but they don't shy away from it. That's for sure. Like people, I don't want to say they've embraced it, but they don't ignore it and they don't hope that it'll just go away. They deal with it, and they've it's just interesting how the people in Louisiana have evolved with hurricanes over the centuries, and it is different than the people in North Carolina. As a geographer, that's a very fascinating part to this, and how you see it all the time in your travels. People in Acapulco are going to be different with hurricanes than they are in Texas versus they are in New England versus Florida versus Louisiana versus North Carolina. And that's what drives.
Mark, the other thing, geographically, when you go through the geography of the U.S., you see these times of clustering, right? North Carolina, the 1950s, there were all these hits. You get to South Florida in the 20s and 40s and 50s, or South Texas in the 30s and 60s. But Louisiana right now is our current real hyperactive cluster. You can learn a lot just from spending time and talking to these people. I was down near Lake Arthur, Louisiana, in Hurricane Delta, and I came across, the cell phones weren't working, the power was out. I came across this grocery store that was up and running, full parking lot, like 18 hours after landfall. And I'm like, how is this possible? I went in and I interviewed them. They said, Laura hit 6 weeks ago. We lost all our food. We had to throw everything out. They said, we learned a lesson. They said, this time we disconnected from the grid. We went to the generators before the winds even picked up. Didn't lose an ounce of food. Now we're here, and it's not just about making money. The biggest thing for them is they're serving their community. 18 hours after landfall, I wondered, is there any other grocery store in America or any other part of the U.S. that could sustain, take sustained winds in the 70s and be up and running in 12 to 18 hours? I thought, my goodness, these are lessons that we can all learn from seeing these areas that have been getting a lot of hits. How are they adapting? What are they doing? And how can we use those lessons elsewhere?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's a great example of it. No, the Lake Arthur area. We were there too. Probably have you on our video somewhere. I have to go back. Hey, there's Hal. There he goes. 2020 seems like an eon ago, doesn't it? Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting your comments about the folks there in Louisiana. Do you notice any sense of burnout from all these hurricanes?
Some.
Usually it takes several years to recover from a big hurricane that's done a lot of damage to your property and family.
Yeah. People will text me I've gotten to be friends with, and you can tell they're not thrilled when they see anything heading their way. Lots of praying they do. Big notch on the Bible Belt down there for sure. And then other people, you can just kind of read between the lines and tell they're kind of anxious about it. But at the end of the day, that experience does help. It's not, that might not make it, certainly never makes it pleasant, but it does make it, at least they do have that experience to fall back on, and the sense of community down there. Oh, one really cool story. I'm glad I thought of this. The day after, Matt and I were leaving Morgan City to head on over to Mississippi to pick up our equipment over there. I kid you not, this reminded me of something you'd see in the Northeast after a big blizzard. The Louisiana State Police, working with the DOT, they were clearing the roads faster than I have ever seen it done. Now, it wasn't like Ida where it was just carpet bombed with trees, but the remarkable quickness of how they got stuff off the road. And in fact, the Louisiana State troopers, they were doing some of the chainsawing. I have never seen that before. It wasn't just the DOT, it was actually the Louisiana State Police jumping out of their SUVs, taking down these trees. The cleanup crew would come in, it's gone, and then the troopers would zip ahead, do the next cluster. It was fascinating to see, and it reminded me of how well they clean up the snow, for example, up in the Northeast. I've never seen that before. Pretty neat.
Yeah, heck, there's still, literally this morning, a truck came by and got the last of the woody debris from Beryl from our street.
Louisiana, man, they're all good to go. We didn't see a shred of, like, is this a week later? No, this was literally the next morning. Matt and I were in shock and so that's got to be that experience. They went through all those hurricanes in 2020, and I think they've learned some stuff. 2021, certainly Ida, that was devastating, but that was very impressive, and that helps to get that wheel turning again of commerce and travel and everything else. So really, big tip of the hat to
Mark,
the
I
folks
think
in
some of that
Louisiana.
might be after the 1-2 punch in 2020 with Laura and Delta. I mean, South Louisiana is as well prepared as anywhere you'll ever see. I remember
Right.
driving around the day before Delta, and there were still piles of debris from Laura. I mean, Laura was an upper level Cat 4. I mean, it
Right.
takes time, but I do know, like, even a friend of mine, Jonathan Brazel with the National Weather Service in Lake Charles, Delta, he had a pile of Laura debris in front of his house that wasn't picked up yet. Delta picked up some of that Laura debris and threw it through his SUV window. I mean, it was just, it's hard to get hit almost same landfall point 6 weeks apart. But I think what they've learned in South Louisiana is the urgency. You know, like you don't know you don't know that you're only going to get one hit this year.
Right.
There could be back-to-back hits. You just see this incredible urgency, and that's a lesson they've learned that we should be applying all along the coastal areas, right?
I think maybe Tim and Alex, somebody from Louisiana Emergency Management, something like that, would be a good speaker in April. How do you do it? How do you do it? Because I was very impressed, and I don't have any reason to blow sunshine their way. It was really, really impressive to see that. And I think you're right, Hal. I think that they have. It's not lessons learned; it's lessons applied. Very good for Louisiana.
Of course, it helps when it's a fairly rural area.
Yeah, and it wasn't. No, look.
Like I said,
if it's a 150 mile per hour, shredder, the monumental task is. But just to see, it's almost like a little dress rehearsal. They handled it really well, and you just ramp it up. It would have taken longer, but just the fact that there was no delay. It was literally the next day, right after sunup. Very impressive stuff there by the people in Louisiana. So everywhere else, take note, follow Louisiana's lead.
Hal's story about the debris from the previous storm becoming missiles in the next one is,
gosh, I remember that.
Great reason for trying to put together your most efficient plan to get the worst of it out of the way.
Yeah, and it was interesting here in Galveston. We got hit with Beryl, and I did notice crews out almost immediately cutting back the trees. I mean, there was a lot of talk about Center Point and just in general, the infrastructure wasn't as well prepared. And part of that were big trees hanging over power lines. I mean, they just hacked those apart. And a lot of people complained, oh, my precious tree. And I get that. But at the same time, you have to pick and choose your battles. And you can't have your favorite tree hanging over power lines and still want power. But as Francine approached, it can't. I went flashing back to Laura and Delta, and I thought, you don't have guarantees that you're just going to have one hit in a year. We see a lot of historic precedent of look at Tampa. It was a long time ago, but 2 of their 3 biggest surges happened in back-to-back months in 1848. Long time ago, it was just an army fort, but still, physically and geographically, it can happen that you get 2 hits in a year.
Interesting point. I wonder. You never know. This next one, is it Louisiana bound? It could, hold your theory there. Not a theory, but you know what I mean? Like, we'll see. That could be an interesting, don't want to jinx anybody, but yeah, I mean, we'll see. We're going to know in about 10 days, aren't we?
Hey, guys, before we finish the program too, Mark, I just wanted to commend you on your field work. I mean, there's always obstacles and setbacks. And it's not just physical. I know when I started storm chasing, I'm thinking the problem is the winds and the water. And like what you've encountered, a lot of times the problem is social issues and theft and all these other things. I want to just encourage you to just keep going. The work you're providing is not only valuable for the public, but very valuable for the research community. And these setbacks are inevitable. That's why you don't see that many people consistently sticking with field work, year after year and decade after decade like you've done. So just keep up the good work. And sorry about this theft, but these things, I think, are inevitable at some point when you're just doing that many chases over that many years.
I appreciate that. 2 things I'll say about it. We have a terrific community behind us. Everything is crowdfunded and donated one way or the other. That is just, I cannot thank those people enough. And the second thing I'll say is the physical fitness side. I have been hitting the gym for about a year and a half. I feel better than I have felt probably in my entire adult life. I'm stronger than I've ever been. And that really helps the mental acuity, that you can have a down in the dumps moment, but it doesn't destroy everything. And my fatigue level is almost non-existent. I am not Superman, and I'm not as fit as Josh Morgerman, but I'm telling you, being in shape in my early 50s like I am, still got to lose some weight, but the strength training and everything else has really, really helped, because it's all a matter of staying focused And like you said, not losing sight of the future and working on that next play.
I think those are great points to wrap on. I know we're coming up on the top of the hour. We could go on for hours, and we've got a lot of comments online. That, Mark, I encourage you to go to the Facebook page and read some of the comments, and feel free to comment on them, because it's mostly comments on what you've been saying. So we appreciate that. Bill, do you have any final thoughts today?
Oh yeah, I piggyback on Hal's compliments. The ability to do what you do without putting people in the worst of harm's way is a great example for others to follow. I mean,
well, thank you. I'm glad to see that it has grown a little bit. I really am. Never wanted to own it, so to speak, and you knew it was inevitable that other people would start doing it. And that is a positive, because the more we learn, the better, pure and simple.
Well, I believe there's pioneers in the industry. In everything we do, there are pioneers. And I think you truly are the pioneer in this. And thank you for doing that. And thank you for sharing your expertise with us on a regular basis every year at the conference and here on NTWC Plus as well. We appreciate it, Mark. Thanks, buddy.
In April, for sure.
I can't wait to see it. Can't wait to see what you have. Hopefully you don't have anything too crazy terrible from the next 10 days. And of course, we'll be back next week at this time to talk about what's happened in the last week. And hopefully it's not too much. So I appreciate it, Mark. Thank you so much for being with us today. Dr. Hal, thanks for joining us. I see you're still a white wall behind you. You're not in the car traveling anywhere yet, but you'll be going soon.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark. Thanks for coming on the program today, and keep up the great work.
Thanks, Hal. Travel safe, man.
And Bill, thanks as always. Appreciate it. We'll see you guys next week, 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning, Central Time, for another episode of NTWC Plus. Thank our sponsors, USAA, South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Weather Company, Weather Boy, and Weather Call. Until next week, take care, stay safe, stay out of the land of the storms, except for Mark.